Something came unplugged and I had to find the plug and plug it. Sorry.
Well, you look extra fabulous today. I have to say that. You look great.
Yeah, those
Thank you.
pearls.
I know, the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
Well done. Well done. We're back.
You have an echo.
I do. Can you hear me now? Is there still an echo?
No, now there's a weird motorcycle-like noise.
There's a lot going on in the Flagger household.
Sounds like someone's practicing a low trombone.
Or
I
is
hope not.
Do you have a dog that's in there that's snoring?
So Max, he was in here. He's no longer in here. Let me check something. 1 second, guys.
Yeah, sounds like a dog snoring.
Max.
I have like 10 pounds of norms here. Everybody's edits, but
Yeah, but whoever did the master job of incorporating all the comments and doing the most recent blue line or green line or whatever line you want to call it, I thought did a really good job.
yeah, we're close. We're very close, I think.
Is that better?
Yeah, keep talking.
I'll keep talking. Is everybody here? Andrea, are we ready to go?
Yes, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start the recording.
It's started.
Thank you. I will call the Los Altos City Council study session meeting of Tuesday, August 24th, 2021 to order at 4:02 p.m. City Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Liang,
Here.
Councilmember Meadows,
Here.
Councilmember Weinberg,
Here.
Vice Mayor Enander,
Here.
and Vice Mayor Flagger.
Here.
The full council is present.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. So next we will have public comment on the only agenda item because this is a study session. There's only one item and that is our council norms and procedures. So if there are members of the public calling in who would like to comment on this agenda item, now is the time to do so. So if you could please raise your hand and the city clerk will call on you accordingly. City Clerk, I don't see any hands raised. Again, this will be the only opportunity for members of the public to comment on this agenda item.
Madam Mayor, I do see one hand back from Joe Benenato.
I see it now. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and give the speaker 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the time. Welcome back. You all look rested and relaxed. I hope that lasts a few hours or days, perhaps. I wanted to share 2 concerns about the council norms. I've spoken on this in the past, and I didn't see either of these topics fully addressed in the latest draft. The first is section 6.8, the use of electronic devices. It appears there's still, a very large loophole that you could drive a large truck through if somebody wanted to get messages using an electronic device. And so, I wish you guys would address that further. Maybe the council just doesn't have the stomach to do that right now, but I would hope that violations, I'm not sure what that noise is, but I would hope that maybe it's a vibrating phone of some sort, but I would hope that violations of the Brown Act with people communicating out of band and not in view of the other council members would not be tolerated, and that you would do something very specific to eliminate that possibility. The second is a concern around, there are various provisions in here to remove, people from commissions or someone who's elected as mayor or as vice mayor from those titles, not necessarily from their council member role. And the question I have is, if there is somebody who does something really egregious, out of bounds, gets arrested perhaps, although innocent until proven guilty, maybe even convicted, it doesn't appear you have a way to remove them from their council member seat. Maybe I'm missing it, and it can be handled some other way, but I would think that there would be a provision to do so for council members as well. And again, if I'm missing that, happy to be educated otherwise. But those are my two concerns, and I hope they get addressed at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any other members of the public? City Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor, I do not see anybody with their hand raised.
Great, thank you. And I'll quickly respond to something Joe mentioned, just to make sure it's clear. This council does not have the authority, and we can't write it into our norms either, to remove a council member from the city council. Now, there are other things that Joe mentioned that we may be able to do, but I wanted to make sure the public understood that we can't write it into norms, policies, or ordinances to remove, elected council members from the city council. That authority rests with the residents and registered voters in Los Altos. Okay, so with that, if we don't have any other members of the public wanting to comment on this agenda item, we'll go straight to it, our only discussion item. And this is our third study session, and we reserved an hour and a half, even though when Jolie and I talked, we didn't think we would use the full hour and a half, but you never know. And similar to what we have done in the past, we want to have a very focused approach to reviewing these norms. We've already gone through the entire set of norms once. And so the two things that we would like to cover within this time are, one, to address if there are sections that are not currently in the existing norms that council would like to add to the norms. And I think we want to start with that discussion. And then the second part of today's meeting is to, and I'm sure we've all gone through the red lines, did we miss anything in the red lines? Your second or third review, did you see something that you didn't see before that you would like to change? So it's really to go through the entire norms one last time before we agendize this for a regular city council meeting, which would be the next step to approve these updated norms. And so I can see everybody on my screen right now. So I am going to open it up for discussion. And again, let's start with, are there sections not included in the existing set of norms that council members would like to suggest adding to the norms? Councilmember Liang.
I think I mentioned prior is that I think it's important to have Zoom protocols and how we would utilize chats. So I think it needs to be consistent, and I think the Zoom protocols like for some meetings, I think, for example, it would be appropriate, like when we're saying that we would like people to, when we did the EAH housing thing, I think that was appropriate use of chat. But during council meetings, I think the chat function is distracting. If there's something very important, like the person can't get on, I think that's important. But having people have conversations back and forth is a little distracting. So if we can put in something about that.
So yeah. I agree, Councilmember Liang. I mean, our practice has been to disable the chat feature for council meetings. So we have not had that issue. But if you're concerned that a future council, if we continue in this Zoom format, may want to use the chat feature, then I am comfortable, saying that in our norms, that if, you're conducting the meeting via Zoom or any other online meeting vehicle, that the chat feature should be turned off. And I know a lot of other Brown Act bodies do that. It's distracting, and that's a public record, right? Whatever discussion takes place, it has to be recorded. So I'm indifferent about the suggestion, Councilmember Lee Eng, because I don't think it's a problem, but I don't think it would hurt if majority of the council wants to include some list of Zoom protocols. So I'm going to stop there to see if anybody else would like to comment. Councilmember Meadows.
Yeah, I agree that, proactively, if we want to say that, because it makes sense, there should not ever be council chatting in a council meeting in the chat function, but I don't think we have that problem. I also want to point out that Councilmember Lee Eng seems to be frozen. So.
Oh, that's true. Her video. We can hear you, Councilmember Lee Eng, but your picture is frozen, so I don't know if you want to turn it off and then turn it back on.
Am I still frozen?
No, it's blank. We can hear you clearly, but we're not seeing you at all. It's a
My
black
camera's on.
screen.
Okay, my camera's on. I see myself on mine, which is funny because I see myself on my computer.
Right. Is your video, is it open?
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah. No, am I the only one? Can anybody see Councilmember Lee Eng? No, try again, Councilmember Lee Eng. And if you can hear us, I'm just going to continue the discussion.
Okay.
Were you finished, Councilmember Meadows?
I wanted to express agreement with the proactive addition of that. Yeah.
Okay. And I see the Vice Mayor nodding her head. Councilmember Weinberg?
I don't oppose it. I'm somewhat indifferent because I don't think that we're doing it. I can't imagine when we would be doing it at a council meeting. But otherwise, I guess I'm in alignment with your comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Weinberg. Okay, so that's one addition, and I know Jolie and I'm sure Trevor is taking notes like we have in the past. Any other additions to the current norms? Councilmember Meadows.
One comment, and this may belong outside of the norms, but in case it belongs in it, I'm going to bring it up again. And when we've talked about the definition of council liaisons here in the norms, we agreed that we'd have a conversation to further define those roles. And so I don't want that to get lost, and whether that definition belongs in the norms or not. So I just want to put that out there. If it does belong in the norms, then we could address that potentially today or whenever. The other thing is, I do think, I think, Mayor, your comments earlier are correct that the voters put us all here in our positions. And so we're not here to oust one another, but we do need to have a way to hold ourselves accountable. So if there were to be a breach of the norms, whatever norm in whatever form, we do not at all address accountability and under what format we might discuss it or what that looks like. So I think it's a glaring omission, and I just think that's something we should think about.
Thanks, Councilmember Meadows. Reaction to Councilmember Meadows' suggestion, and I'm glad I see the city attorney coming on because I will turn to her. Councilmember Weinberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with the member, and I think we should take it a step further. I think that we should have a policy of censure and admonition. Doesn't have to be complex. It could be something very simple like Santa Clara has. But I think there's a need for it. I think it's appropriate. I think we should include it.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Weinberg. Vice Mayor, Councilmember Lee Eng, any thoughts on this proposal? I can see all of you, so if I don't see no comments, Vice Mayor, no comments.
I'll defer to hearing what the city attorney has to say before I make any comment.
Okay, so City Attorney, we have one suggestion to have, something in place that addresses or disciplines or allows us to take action when a council member violates the norms. And we have Councilmember Weinberg suggesting that this type of discipline or action should be in the form of an admonition or censure. And so what's the process for us to do something like that?
Well, it would probably go into section 14, violation of procedures, or decorum. It would be in one of those two sections. But I came up with some language that would be sort of a two-step process. So we would put into the norms something along the lines, repeated or serious violation of these norms can be addressed by the council by censure of a council member following notice and an opportunity to be heard. If the council wants to have the censure remedy available, it must be authorized formally in an adopted council policy, and it must allow for the basic due process protections of notice in hearing. So then that is in the norms, and then what we would do is come back with some sort of policy that you would all put input on. I think that the norm should include something that to give notice if there's a serious violation, it can be acted upon by the council, but then there should be a separate adopted policy that would govern those proceedings. I don't think we should put it all in the norms. I think it needs to be a separate policy. So that was just my, I know the mayor asked me about that this afternoon, so that's what I came up with. So I think that would help, but it's up to you if you want to put it into the norms or not.
So that would be, my understanding is that would be the language that would be in the norms. It would basically acknowledge that we had, such a policy if so adopted, and then separately, we would have you as our city attorney basically come back based on direction from council on what a proposed policy would look like for discussion and possible adoption. And for me, this to me will require a lot of discussion, because my concern when it comes to something like this is the criteria, right? We don't want the slippery slope situation. We don't where council members or ourselves or future council members abuse this. And so I am comfortable maybe tweaking the city attorney's language a little bit, having something in the norms mentioning the possibility of such a policy. And if that's all we need to do for the norms, I'm comfortable with that. But then separately, we would have to discuss, any such policy and the contents of the policy and how it would apply in the criteria. So I'm going to stop here because Vice Mayor, you had said you wanted to hear from the city attorney first. So let me see if you have any responses.
Thank you. Yes. And thank you to the city attorney for that. It just seems that putting something in the norms to reference something that we haven't done, and I agree with the mayor that it would take a great deal of discussion, kind of seems backwards to me. It kind of seems like we would, if we decide we want to pursue this, we would want to develop the policy and procedures and criteria. And then once we did that, we would then suitably add a reference in the norms and procedures.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Lee Eng.
I concur with what the Vice Mayor just said.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to Councilmember Meadows, Councilmember Weinberg, now that we've heard from the city attorney and your colleagues. Any response? Councilmember Meadows.
Yeah, I'm agnostic to how we do this and the order, whatever is the best way to do it. And I'm thinking of it generically. I do think that you know, in the past, when regarding commissions, council didn't have a mechanism. Council put a mechanism in place regarding commissions. And I just think it's proper housekeeping if we have a mechanism where, you know, we have the ability to hold ourselves accountable. So I'm fine with whatever order it happens. I mean, I think it makes sense to potentially have the policy in place, and then we can update the norms to refer to that. But I do think it would be a good idea. You know, it's about all of each and every one of us. It's, you know, not specific.
Councilmember Weinberg.
And future, not just us, but I mean,
Right. We do have term limits.
yes, thank heavens.
Don't want to be tempted. Councilmember Weinberg.
I agree with what Councilmember Meadows said.
Okay, so let me make sure, and because so on the one hand, because we're revising the norms, I don't think it hurts to put something in the current draft that says, you know, and I tried to write down Jolie's language, but essentially it would say any violation of the norms will be addressed in, you know, one of different ways, including, you know, adoption of a policy. Like, we can draft language that doesn't necessarily tie our hands or guarantee the adoption of a policy, but if we adopt, and it acknowledges that, you know, we've heard from members of the public, we have 2 council members and myself were saying our norms are currently silent on any violation. So at least this language in the norms would acknowledge that we are looking at how we address violations of our norms. On the other hand, I completely understand with the Vice Mayor, if we have this language and there's no teeth, if there's no policy ever, then what's the point? I mean, it will just require hopefully just a quick update of the norms once we adopt the policy. But what I don't want to happen is we delay the adoption of the norms. We've done a lot of good work in our norms. We've spent 3 study sessions. And so if council members are comfortable saying, let's not add language about, you know, the consequences of a violation until we have those consequences in place, and we'll come back and do a quick adjustment, I'm comfortable with that too. So is there consensus on leaving it out? And then once we have a policy, we come back and do a quick amendment. So we would, 1, move forward on adopting, bringing it to council, the current updated version without this violation language for adoption. And in parallel, you know, move forward with a policy and then do a quick amendment down the road. Is there consensus for that approach? Councilmember Meadows, I see you.
Yeah, I have a question maybe for the city attorney. So these are council norms. We may pass them, we may not unanimously pass them or whatever. If a councilman, we don't physically sign that we agree to these norms, they're just passed if 3 or more of us do that. So are we, if it's passed by the council, then all of us, is it as though we are signing if 3 or more of us adopt these and therefore we are beholden to the norms? I mean, is that some method of accountability right there? And maybe there's a line that Julie can put in and say, by adoption of these norms, each council member agrees to be beholden to them or something like that. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, that's not the right language, but Jolie, I don't know if you have any comment on that concept.
I was looking at the general purpose section, and I know we amended it.
Which number can you tell us?
1.1, the purpose, and then there's the values, and there's the review, and then it does say that you'll be bound by all state and local laws, the PRA, Political Reform Act, and then
as the city attorney is going through, you know, for me, it's less about being bound by the terms. We are, regardless if you're a part of the council that adopted it or not, we all are.
yes,
What I think is being
1.5
discussed,
says that.
I think what's being discussed is the consequences, right? So we're all bound by these terms, even if we didn't vote for them. But it's the consequences if someone, reading Jolie's language, repeatedly or seriously violates the norms. We do not currently have any consequences to take or mechanism to take action against any such council member or council members.
To be clear though, 1.5 is just being proposed to be added now. So that language about council being bound to the norms is just being proposed now. So it has not been in there, if I'm correct.
No, it was just added. I know the mayor and I worked on that one, yeah, because I
So that's a
remember,
good addition.
yeah, I remember we put that in, so.
So with that, is everybody then comfortable not adding the language that the city attorney shared until we have an adopted policy? I know Vice Mayor, yes. I know Councilmember Liang, everybody, okay, good. So, but we'll move forward with adopting the norms. We're not gonna wait for this because who knows how long it will take for us to adopt a policy on violation of the norms. Great. Okay, so still going down the list of any sections not currently included in the norms that we would like added. And then on the council liaisons, Councilmember Meadows, you raised that as well. I think this is very similar, at least this is my take, I'll open up for discussion. This to me is similar to the violation policy, where we haven't as a council really talked about the role of the liaisons and whether or not it's gonna change, stay the same, evolve. And so we need to have that discussion and then update the norms accordingly. But I don't think we're all on the same page about our vision for the role of the liaison. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just to clarify one thing, and that is that there is a definition and description of the role of the council liaison in the commission handbook. And that whether we want to change that, that's a different story, but there is one there. And the council norms and procedures also refer that if there is a conflict or whatever between the two, that the commission handbook takes precedence. So it would make sense if we do want to re-examine that liaison role. To me, it makes sense to look at changing the commission handbook.
Councilmember Weinberg.
I think the vice mayor's point is well stated, but I'm a little uncomfortable with how this is proceeding. I recall Councilmember Meadows bringing this issue up very early into this council's term. And I distinctly remember someone said, this is not the appropriate place to talk about it. We should really talk about it when we're discussing the norms and procedures. Now, here we are wrapping up our discussion about the norms and procedures. So when is it that we're actually going to go back and look at the role of council member liaisons? I guess the easiest thing for me to ask is for this to be discussed, does it have to be put on an agenda?
Well, I
No,
think
so we can, you're correct, Councilmember Weinberg. We can now take the time during the study session and discuss the role of the liaison. We actually started that discussion and then we stopped and said we'd revisit it. Because I think Councilmember Meadows shared this, I was at the retreat. I think that may have been the first time Councilmember Meadows raised it. And so you're correct, we could discuss it now. And for me, even if the current language resides in the handbook, it doesn't mean it has to stay there. As council, we can decide to move it to norms. We have that authority. And so if we have time, I actually think, and Jolie and I talked about this, we think we have time. We have reserved an hour and a half, and I'm not sure we need the full time. So if council members are ready to talk about the role of the liaison and whether or not we want it changed, we can do that now. I just wasn't sure based on the retreat discussion if there was support to revisit the current role. Councilmember Liang.
So I just have one quick question because you keep saying we're going to have enough time. There are some changes I still would like to discuss. And then when you talk about, do we have any more additions or possible additions, I'd like to understand what other additions people would have, because it's not that we're just going to talk about this and then we're done. Because I have other things as well that I'd like to raise. So I just would like to understand, because when you keep saying, we're going to cover this and we have enough time to do that, if we're going to keep talking about everything the way we've been, we might need another study session.
No, and you're right.
So I
We'll
just
see
wanted
where
to-
we will see where the discussion takes us. And that's why I did show of hands, and I call on whoever raises their hands first. And so the fact that Council Member Meadows has raised the liaison as a council,
Okay,
we can decide if we want to now discuss it as part of amending the current norms, meaning further defining the role or changing the role of the liaison. And I know the Vice Mayor mentioned the current language is in the handbook, and we could have the city attorney further explain how we would do that. But it is definitely something that's been raised and should be part of the norms discussion. So once we're done with Councilmember Meadows, if your hand is up next for a new topic to add, I will come to you. Vice Mayor?
Mayor, I wouldn't exclusively want to rely on my memory, but my recollection is that when we had all proposed various things that we wanted to change in these during our first study session, that was one that had been proposed, and you were polling people for whether we should incorporate that or not. My recollection is that did not get 3 votes, and that is why it is not in here and why we have not further discussed it. So if the council member wants to bring it back up, that's okay, but my recollection is we already said we were going to let it go for this round of changes to this document.
I have a different recollection, but I don't, I agreed that it wouldn't necessarily be incorporated here, but we all agreed, or at least my recollection was all or most of us agreed that we would take the topic up. Potentially, maybe it's better actually as a agenda item on a council meeting, and then that could decide where it goes. Does it go in the norms? But my recollection is that we did agree that we would address it. We wouldn't just let it drop. It wasn't like it was going away. It was, we were going to talk about it because the roles are not well defined.
I'll just throw in my recollection, and all this is recorded. I like saying that. So my recollection is this was raised at the retreat. And at the retreat, myself, the Vice Mayor, and Councilmember Lee Eng were saying we were comfortable with the current role. So I remember us saying, but then we went on to say that if we're going to discuss it, the appropriate place would be during the norms discussion. So you're both right, Vice Mayor. I was aligned with you. I was like, yeah.
Mayor, it was definitely suggested, and in one of the first drafts of red lines that came to us. So it was not just at the retreat. This was discussed and polled during a study session about the specific norms. But my suggestion is, for the sake of time and getting these things approved, that we also set that aside, whether we want to handle it by referral to the governance committee or we want to agendize it before we do that or whatever. I'll leave to your recommendation, but I would prefer we not try to get down in the weeds on that one. And we go ahead and try and get through the rest of this document and get this puppy approved tonight, as far as our own recommendation.
No, I agree. And I am comfortable. And I think this is what we said at the retreat, and you and the Councilmember Lee Eng, I think we're aligned here, the 3 of us, where we were comfortable with the current role. I'm open to hearing any improvements the new council members may have. And so that's why I was open to having the discussion. But it sounds like we're also fine tabling it, since majority of us are comfortable with the existing role of the liaison, not that we're not open to changes. So I'm good. So the 3 of us saying, we're going to table it for now. And I'm going to move on to other council members to see if they have any other changes or additions they would like to make to the norms that are not currently in the norms. So we heard from Councilmember Lee Eng on Zoom protocols. We heard from Councilmember Meadows on council liaisons, and identifying or developing language to hold ourselves accountable. And we started hearing from Councilmember Weinberg as well. So go ahead, Councilmember Weinberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I propose that we adopt a norm where if any council member or commissioner is unsure whether they can participate in discussion of an agenda item, and to clear that up, they get a letter from the FPPC that at the beginning of the discussion of that agenda item, whether at the council level or commission level, that member or commissioner discloses on the record that they obtained a letter from the FPPC, and that letter immediately be made available to the public. In fact, maybe it should be made available to the public as part of the packet so that the public can see it ahead of time.
Thanks, Councilmember Weinberg. City Attorney, I'm going to go straight to you on this suggestion.
It's up to the council to make that determination, that the letter needs to be, that they have received the letter and they can participate or they can't participate. I've actually seen on other local agencies' agendas where the agenda matter has disclosure of all potential conflicts or all conflicts, just to make sure people disclose it, or but there is really no legal reason. The FPPC advice letters are public records, so and they're available at the FPPC website as well. So
my only concern, City Attorney and Councilmember Weinberg, is the timing. Sometimes the FPPC isn't the most efficient in turning around the letters. And so if the idea is that if someone isn't sure, they can't participate on an item until they get that FPPC letter clearing them, how will that impact some items that we may need to move forward? Because I know the FPPC sometimes doesn't turn things around quickly. Councilmember Weinberg, you want to respond to that and maybe how we can address that?
I guess I'm not quite sure what the confusion really is. If I believe that I may have a conflict and it's not something that I can easily resolve, and I make an application to the FPPC, it's going to be my decision whether or not to participate before I get clarification from the FPPC. That's on me. Now,
Okay.
now, once I get the letter, though, there's been a determination by a public body. I guess we could go further and ask that someone disclose that they sent a letter to, or they sent a request to the FPPC. I think that wouldn't be a bad idea. But what I'm trying to do here is encourage as much transparency as possible. We did have an issue earlier in the year where a commissioner made a request to the FPPC and nobody knew about that until after the discussion. And then the FPPC letter was problematic because some of the facts relied upon by the commission, by the FPPC, were a little bit jumbled. That's the sort of thing that I would love to see us take care of ahead of time. Because if someone had seen that letter before that commission hearing, an alarm could have gone up and said, hey, wait a minute, there's a potential conflict here. This letter either covers it, or if it does not cover it, then we're protecting both council members and commissioners from making what could be a decision that they're conflicted out of.
Other council members want to weigh in? Councilmember Meadows.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, in many of these cases, or most of these cases, they're obvious, and council members or commissioners won't have to go to FPPC. I mean, I think it's rare that it's not apparent when someone has a conflict. So to me, it makes sense for those circumstances where it might happen that we try to be transparent.
And Mayor and Council, if you are awaiting a pending FPPC decision, they have a rule that you can participate in voting on continuing the item until you receive the letter. So that's in the FPPC regulations. So, but then if there's going to be an item where action needs to be taken, the prudent thing would be not participate until you've received that letter.
Mayor?
Could this be simplified by saying that if someone is submitting a matter to FPPC, that they consult with the city attorney and take the city attorney's advice with regard to their conduct and participation. And then that way, wherever things are and whatever the rules happen to be and whatever convoluted situation we may be in, the city attorney is fully informed, able to advise, and then also able to talk with staff and make sure that staff knows the right thing to do as well. And I think I'm more comfortable with the city attorney guiding that direction than trying to write a particular procedure into a document like this. Because like, I didn't know about what the city attorney just said. That was news to me.
Councilmember Lee Ang.
I have some concerns and I am uncomfortable until I truly understand how it would be written, because I'm just concerned about how things are being put in here. And if they're going to use in the future, that if you did this and you did that, and with, I'm just concerned about how it'll be called out as a violation. And I know, like Councilmember Meadows just said, it isn't apparent sometimes that you have to seek guidance from FPPC, or people know that they were aware of something that might have been, but that's where we look to our city attorney for guidance in a lot of this. So I'm just concerned about how everything, I mean, is to a point where we have to write everything out, and you just it demonstrates a lack of trust. It demonstrates a lack of good judgment. It demonstrates, I'm just concerned.
So city attorney, your title has been invoked twice now. Do you want to respond to Vice Mayor and Councilmember Lee Ang?
I'm fine with having them contact me for, you know, it usually goes to the clerk, and then the clerk contacts me, and then we can address if we think we need to get an FPPC opinion. And I do know that in the handbook, there's language already in the handbook that you are to consult the city attorney early, you know, not tap on my shoulder or my virtual shoulder at the meeting and say, oh my goodness, you know, do I have a conflict?
Yes.
That's problematic. So if we don't put it in the norms, we already have it in the handbook, but I don't really have an opinion one way or another. I'll do what you want me to do, but I do try to be involved in the conflicts, and people usually do email me or call me.
That's why I started with you, city attorney, when this was first raised. Councilmember Weinberg, coming back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a little surprised and disappointed that there's this much pushback on it. An FPPC letter is a public document. All I'm asking is that for the purposes of transparency and to foster further trust between the community and the government, if someone gets a letter from the FPPC, they disclose it before discussion of the agenda, and the letter be made available to the public more easily than someone having to write the FPPC.
So I can address that, Councilmember Weinberg. So I am actually not opposed to the idea. It just needs to be carefully drafted and what we're actually requiring. I can tell you from practice, and I can use the REACH codes as an example where this happened on our council, the previous council, where the mayor at the time disclosed exactly what the FPPC letter said. And I think that's been the practice, where if there is a FPPC letter, the council member does disclose it on the record. I think my concern, at least when you initially said it, was it's the idea that a council member, if they're concerned about a conflict, they would need to request the FPPC essential clearance letter, so we used to call like letter, and they wouldn't be able to participate till they got that FPPC letter. So those, if that's not, so those are the two areas I was concerned about. I could support the idea of, and I think we do it right now, we got all sworn in, where if we think we have a potential conflict, we should talk to our city attorney and figure out what the recommended approach is. And she will also tell us if she thinks we should get a FPPC letter, which I know she does. And so if that's the method or the path we want to take, I can definitely support that. I think that's what we already do. Now, the question is, if the recommendation or the direction is you should get a FPPC letter on this, I'd suggest you get a FPPC letter, and we cannot continue the item, because I know we did that before, then I actually think it's personal responsibility. It is on that person on whether or not with this potential conflict, if they want to participate. When they get that FPPC letter, I agree with you that they should then read it and make it part of our council record, not just the general public record. So what I just described is something I'm very comfortable supporting, but I want to make sure that that is what you were saying, or if you could move to that suggestion as well.
That was exactly what I was saying. I do not support, nor did I intend to suggest that if someone is unsure, then the norm should say that they must recuse themselves. That is a personal decision for the commissioner or the council member to make. No, the norm that I am proposing is if someone has obtained an FPPC letter, they disclose it before discussion of the agenda item, and if possible, make it a part of the packet even before the meeting starts. So it's out there, the public sees it.
We seem to have lost Councilmember Liang.
Councilmember Liang, are you there in audio? City Clerk, if you can hear me, can you see if you could reach
I will try. I don't,
Councilmember Liang? Thank you. Thanks, Councilmember Meadows. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Only to ask for a clarification from Councilmember Weinberg, because I think when he made his first comment, he was talking about both commissioners and council. And since we do have stuff in the handbook, in the commission handbook about the commissioners, I think whatever we might add here ought to be limited to council, and what there is about the commissioners belongs in the commissioners handbook.
City Attorney, what's the process to update the Commissioner's Handbook? I don't think that has come before us. Is that at the staff level, or does it come to us?
No, we did that through the governance committee before.
Okay.
Yeah, Jan and I worked on some tweaks on it and then brought those forward to council when she and I were the governance committee. So.
Okay.
And I thought John Maginot.
Yeah, we worked with him when we had questions, or, making sure that we didn't screw something up.
So, Mayor, if I may add,
I'm just, we can talk. I just don't want to have a substantive discussion without. And this is still being recorded.
Yeah, I just think that I don't want the tail wagging the dog. Let me see if I can get the analogy right. The commission handbook is kind of the tail, and really the council norms as far as this type of FPPC conflict language really should be driven by that from the council perspective. And then if necessary, the commission handbook can be made consistent. I wouldn't want us to be because the commission handbook says something.
Yeah, I guess I have seen the commission handbook operate a little differently. I've seen the norms as being the things that describe and constrain and exhort the council as to its behavior. And the commission handbook principally deals with the same, it's a parallel document, but for the commission operations, including the commissioners, and then in a very small part, the commission liaison role. But predominantly the commission handbook is for the commissioners and the norms and procedures is for the council.
No, I completely agree. But what I meant to say is that the topic, particularly of this FPPC topic, really should be driven around what the council defines as appropriate. And then if it therefore triggers a change in the commission handbook on that topic. No, you're absolutely right in terms of the purpose of the documents. I agree.
Right, and I will just add too, that if we're placing certain restrictions or requirements on council, that would apply to the commissioners as well. We should, as a council, make sure that it applies to them as well, like hold them to the same level that we're holding ourselves. I see Councilmember Lee Eng is back. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? I'm on the phone now.
I can. You're good? Are you okay?
Well, that's the only way I could get in. I tried to log back on and this is the only way I could get in.
Okay, so we didn't have any substantive discussions while you were gone. I can bring it back to see if there are any other points on the FPPC suggestion. And I think, you know, Councilmember Weinberg clarified his proposal. I support what his proposal is. I don't know if anybody has any other follow-up questions or clarifications. It incorporates working with the city attorney to what the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Lee Eng said. So I think it basically captures what we currently do, but it formalizes it in the norms and then adds that requirement of reading the FPPC letter once we receive it or putting it in the record. Okay, so anything else, Councilmember Weinberg? I'm going to move on to see if anybody else has anything they would like to add.
I do.
Are you asking me if there's anything else on this issue or other things that I'd like to add?
Other things you would like to add before I move to another council member?
Yes, there are two more things that I'd like us to add.
Okay.
One is, I think we should add a norm where if a member discovers that they have violated the council norms, they disclose that at the next regular city council meeting.
So I'm going to pause and have other people react to it. Show of hands, anybody who wants to react? So I'll react to it. So that is a broad requirement because there are things in the norms, Councilmember Weinberg, that I may violate and I may not realize I violated it. So I think, so if you're saying if I I will not be held responsible if I violated a norm but didn't realize I violated a norm. And it also for me depends on what norm I violated and whether or not there's any ripple effect from that norm. So it's worth mentioning at a council meeting. Or is it something that, you know, I violated the norm, you know, shame on me, but it's not something that's worth reporting out at a council meeting. And I wonder also, I'll just throw in a third thing, if this could also be wrapped up into the policy we'll be considering, where maybe one of the first things we can do if someone violates the norm is to report it out. So this is the first time I'm hearing this suggestion, so I'm reacting to it. And those are the three things that came to mind. Would love to hear from our colleagues. Anyone? Councilmember Meadows?
I agree with how you framed it, Mayor.
Okay, see the Vice Mayor nodding. Councilmember Liang, I can't.
I'm not in support of that, how it was, yeah.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Weinberg, no support for adding that language to the norms.
Okay, the last suggestion I'd like to make has to do with norm 6.8.
So you're going, wait.
what-
So remember, these are new sections, Councilmember Weinberg.
Oh, you're, okay.
I'll come back. Okay, so Councilmember Lee Eng, any new sections that are not now?
So either, would you consider like if it's a total change of a previous section, is that considered like a new section?
No, so that's when we're going through, again, one last time, you would raise that if it's an existing section.
Well, let me help explain it, because let me give an example. 8.7, annual retreat. Annual retreat should totally be changed. It's not an annual retreat. It should be called annual priority setting meeting. And I think it really gives people an idea that it's confusing, and it's also misleading, if you ask me. So I would like to totally change that. So either we can change it then, and I'll save all my other edits for when we go through them, like you said. And
So I see that as amending an existing section. It's one thing if you're proposing, in addition to an annual retreat, we have an annual priority setting, but you're actually saying revising 8.7. So I'm going to hold off until when we go through and we get to section 8 for you to raise that again.
okay.
Any other hands before we start going through the norms? Hopefully one last time, starting with section 1. Okay, I don't see any hands, so let's start with section 1. Any additional comments, changes to the red lines we've already looked at and agreed to? Okay, I'm looking for hands. I see no hands. Then moving to section 2. Any additional comments or changes to section 2? Section 3.
I have a problem with something that's added to section 3.4.
Okay,
And I don't think I've agreed to that, and I don't think we've discussed it. So I'm not in concurrence with what we've added. So either we can discuss it.
okay, go ahead, Councilmember Liang. So what in 3.4 you're not in agreement with?
That part that the council liaison to the youth commission be required to be a member of this subcommittee.
I remember discussing that, and was there, I mean, it would not have been added. It would not have been added if there wasn't consensus, meaning at least 3 council members who supported it.
I don't think we even, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm gonna put it back out. We're looking at 3.4. And where's the language, Councilmember Liang?
I see it here, and it's in yellow. And it's been added to 3.4 standing subcommittees, the second paragraph.
I think that's an
I
existing here.
don't-
That's existing.
Yeah, I don't
good
have
to know.
that in my red line.
So I think you're on an old one, Councilmember Liang, because you had disagreed with that, and I think it went away. I mean, I had proposed that, and you had disagreed, and I think it went away, and I don't see it in the
Okay,
version.
as long as it went away. Okay, thank you. Sorry, maybe I've got this bad copy. Okay, thank you.
No, but do you have the right copy? Because I want to make sure we're all looking at the right copy. Do you want someone to send it to you, Councilmember Liang?
Please.
The way I got it,
It was part of the study session packet, and it's the first red line document.
Okay, the first one. Yeah, I have like a whole stack, that's why. Let me double check.
It's the first one right after the staff report.
Okay. Okay,
Page 6, I think.
and the red lines, right?
yeah, although it's blue in mine.
Okay, I think this is it. Okay, sorry, we can go.
So yes, Councilmember Liang, that language that you oppose, we did not include.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Section 4. Any comments, changes to that section? I can't see you, Councilmember Liang.
Yeah, here.
Okay. Section 6.
Mayor, I'm sorry. With
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
respect to 4.4, this is not exactly in conformance with what we have in the commission handbook. And I think I raised this. This is a concern I have with putting commissioner requirements in this document, because then you've got a concurrence issue, because it says you're in the handbook, it says you're expected to attend everything, but you only are in trouble if you've missed 3 in a row or more than a quarter of them over the course of a year. So this isn't exactly in concurrence with that, and I don't know what to do about it.
So I think we can merge them, because I think the key change was less about the number of meetings, and it's really where it starts. If the commissioner can, it's really the process of, so if a commissioner is not meeting the attendance requirements, so wherever those attendance requirements. So for me, it's really that first sentence, making sure we reconcile it with what's in the handbook. But the part that's new that I know we discussed was that process where who talks to the commissioner, who does what. Right. And so if a commissioner is not meeting the requirements, then we're saying the chair will first address it and so on. So for me, the only sentence that may be inconsistent with the handbook is that first sentence, because we wanted to address that step-by-step process of what happens when a commissioner isn't meeting the attendance requirements.
Yeah, I think what I would say is commissioners are expected to, commissioner attendance is specified in the handbook. And then as a replacement for that first sentence. And then if a commissioner is not meeting the attendance requirement, the chair does this and blah, 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 blah.
I support that. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay, I
would actually keep it the way it is. I think that the handbook says that if there's an inconsistency between the handbook and the norms prevail, doesn't it?
Right,
so,
but
so rather than trying to shoehorn it into what the commission handbook says, let's have the commission handbook follow this.
So the current order of precedence, Councilmember Weinberg, is if it relates to the commissioners, then the handbook actually takes precedence. So, so we would, I mean, as a council, we obviously are the ones who would change any language in the handbook. But we already have an attendance requirement in the handbook, and Vice Mayor just went over what it is currently.
It says 4.2, it says that if there's a conflict, then the handbook rules for commissions and committees. Yeah. So it does state that, but it is weird to add wording that is inconsistent. To say commissioners are expected to attend all regularly scheduled meetings. I actually thought that what the Vice Mayor said was better, because technically we all try, whether it be council or commissioners, but you're not in reality expected to have 100% attendance. It's just,
maybe we can change that sentence to say commissioners are expected to attend meetings in conformance with the handbook.
That's what you said.
No, I like that change, Vice Mayor, where we reference the handbook regarding any attendance requirement. Okay, section 5.
I have a change.
Which section?
4.5.
Okay.
Third sentence. Any proposed removal should be with cause. It's not with or without cause, because if we don't have cause, why even put that? I don't like the way that sentence is worded. Then it just be a personality issue and someone goes, oh, I don't like that person. And then that's not a justifiable cause to remove someone.
Well, it would take 3, not just one person, but I'm going to go to the city attorney. Go ahead, city attorney.
I was going to say that the first sentence says commissioners serve at the pleasure of the city council. So then that is why a commissioner can be removed with or without cause. You don't have to have cause.
then I'm not comfortable with the first sentence. Because it's not at the pleasure that you serve at the pleasure of the city council. You serve to,
That's just language that is customarily used. The city manager serves at the pleasure of the council. The city attorney serves at the pleasure. That's just the language. It might be arcane, but that it shows that you're put in place with a majority and you can be removed with a majority. That's essentially what it's saying, but you can change the language with the council.
Anybody else wants to weigh in here? I know why it's drafted this way, and I think we do want to give councils this flexibility to remove with or without cause. Okay, I'm going to move on to section 5. Any changes to section 5?
No, I didn't change anything.
Okay, section 6. Okay, Councilmember Weinberg.
6.8. I think it could use an awful lot of work. I would love it if we could have something similar to say what the city of Petaluma does that was circulated by a resident several months ago to the entire council. But for the purposes of brevity, I think we should end 6.8 after the first sentence. If someone has a family emergency that they're worried about, give out, let the city clerk know, give the number to the city clerk, to family members. I mean, it's.
No, I'm sorry, no.
I think it's disingenuous to the entire community, quite frankly.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Weinberg. Vice Mayor?
We already discussed this, Mayor. We already came to the conclusion that this was the language that had a majority support. So I would not change it. And I think it's disingenuous to expect that my daughter, whose cell phone is set, that for emergencies to call her mom, that you said every time I'm going to have a meeting that she's going to change that. And if she's in a car accident, that they're going to call something else. I mean, it's just crazy. I'm sorry. We agreed to this language already.
Well, we agreed to all the language that we're going back and looking at now.
But we specifically said we wanted this language. So I understand, appreciate you have an opportunity to bring it up. I disagree with making a change.
Councilmember Weinberg, to address that, we actually changed this language a couple of times where we're saying if the council member is aware of the urgent family matter, that council member needs to inform the mayor. And if the issue comes up during the meeting, then they need to request a break. So it would avoid, any concern about someone being on electronic devices. And then if someone from the public were to say, oh, that council member, oh, Mayor Flagger was on her phone, I cannot then say, oh, but I was on the phone because my daughter or son had an emergency, because I should have complied with these norms. We redrafted this to address that concern. I agree with the Vice Mayor, I am one vote, but I agree with the Vice Mayor that we need to have some flexibility in allowing for things like this. So, just saying you can't use electronic devices, that hard and fast, I think it's not practical, but I do think we should have language in here that ensures that we don't abuse it and people are really only using their electronic devices in limited circumstances.
Oh, I agree, but it's being abused. That's the problem.
Well, that's why we're hoping to fix it, Councilmember Weinberg. We're hoping that now, if it was being abused, that with this language, that abuse will stop. That's what we hope. If there was, then hopefully this will address it. Councilmember Meadows.
I don't know if I've brought this up before. It's on this same one, but not in the wording. So use of electronic devices. A computer is an electronic device.
Good point.
I am one of, I'm not actually sure how many council members use electronic packets versus paper packets. I use electronic packets. Therefore, by definition, I'm going to be on another electronic device when I'm looking at my computer because I'm reading my packet and I'm reading my notes. So as written, I'm a little uncomfortable that that makes it sound like I shouldn't be doing that. I really
But
try.
are you sending and receiving communications?
No,
That's
but
what's
that's-
key.
No, but this section is titled Use of Electronic Devices During Council Meetings. I am not sending and receiving communications.
That's what that's what the language says. So we can change the title, but when you actually read the language, it's specific to if you're sending or receiving communications that the rest of the public doesn't have visibility into.
I'm just sensitive that, you know, people say, oh, someone's looking at an electronic device. Well, I'm looking at an electronic device. I'm demonstrating it for you now, but it's because that's where my notes are.
Right.
Okay.
No, and maybe the city attorney and I can play with just the title.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, but we're on a Zoom call right now. So everyone on this call is looking at an electronic device and they are receiving communications. Now, they're not communications that aren't available to everyone else, but if you're looking at your camera and you're talking, you're using your device. I mean, the point of this, the point of the rule is to make sure that no one is given, no citizen is given extraordinary access to a member of council, and that members of council are not able to communicate with people about items before the council to which the rest of the public does not have privy. That's what we're trying to avoid. And I think
Or with each
6.8
other.
isn't accomplishing that.
Or with each other.
Or with each other. Agreed.
Point taken. And so the next time we will see this packet is at a council meeting. And hopefully it won't require this much discussion, but Councilmember Weinberg, point taken. And if there's anything we can tweak to fine tune, you know, the fact that it's sending and receiving communications, not just watching a meeting or using a Zoom meeting. And we'll see where we are in 2 months. We may not be doing this, who knows? But point taken.
I trust you to sort this with the city attorney.
Yeah, we will. And you'll see it again. You will see it again one more time before you vote on it. Okay, section 7. Section 8.
I have section.
Yeah.
The amending of 8.7.
Yep.
It should be called priority setting meeting. I think that the city council should hold its annual priority setting meeting following the reorganization of the council. So that's
And I
what
can speak, no, and I appreciate that change, Councilmember Lee Eng, because I remember when I was planning the retreat with our former interim city manager, this is one of the things that we talked about, which was, you know, when you think of retreat, it's more than just setting priorities, right? And we actually, as you know, I tried to put in some team building, but a retreat is definitely more than a priority setting. And to date, you're 100% correct. It has been a priority setting meeting. Now, the question I think for council is, you know, if we like, you know, the future mayor in planning next year's event, like, would she want to do more of a retreat kind of event that includes priority setting? Because if that's the case, let's not change it. Let's just make sure that what we do is more than just a priority setting. And one of the things, you know, I said, you know, if I had to do the retreat over again for this year, I would have actually made it 2 days just to do more and for different reasons. So my preference is to keep it as a retreat, but then we actually plan a retreat because I think a retreat is beneficial to councils. But I'm going to open it up. Do council members want to change it from retreat to priority setting, which it currently really is? I agree with Councilmember Lee Eng. Or do we want to really keep it as a retreat and plan that kind of event? Vice Mayor.
Well, one more thing, please, if I could clarify.
Oh,
And I wanted to add to the, and then there would be a 8.7A, and then it would have something in regards to a retreat And that would pertain to team building and relationship building.
So you're suggesting 2 different events or a combined event?
2.
We don't have to. Okay. All right. So Councilmember Lee Eng is suggesting having an annual retreat and an annual priority setting. I'm going to stop here. Vice Mayor.
In former years, the retreats were 2 days or a day and a half.
Right.
And included some more things having to do with team building as well as priority setting. I think I would prefer to keep a broader statement here that allows us to have some, as you like to say, Mayor, some flexibility. And maybe in the second sentence, it should say one purpose or a primary purpose or of the retreat shall be to review accomplishments, blah, 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 which implies that there may be other things, but also puts a focus on something that I think we've all acknowledged is a key part of that effort. And it would not preclude us from doing other things.
Anybody else? Let me do the consensus check. Are council members more in favor of keeping it a little bit more broad, give us that flexibility to do all these different things? Do we want to do one retreat, one priority setting? Do we want to limit it to priority setting? Councilmember Meadows?
I'd keep it broad. I mean, we can just call it an annual meeting. It doesn't have to, and then it can take any form we choose to put in there. But
Councilmember Weinberg?
I don't care what we title it. I mean, we're gonna have an agenda that says that we're gonna do, title it whatever you want.
Councilmember Liang, because you proposed it, I'm going to come back to you. The Vice Mayor has made an amendment, a proposed amendment to your suggestion.
Well, yeah, I guess to broaden the language, to clarify, and it's always good about making sure people understand, because many people go, oh, I thought what kind of games or stuff that you play at your retreat, or, but people were not aware that we were actually doing a priority setting. So if we can broaden the language to help clarify, I'm all for that.
Okay.
And,
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'll remind Councilmember Liang, we did play a game, and not that I kept score, but I won.
Oh, Councilmember Meadows. Section 9.
I have section 9 change.
Okay.
I think that in section 9, where we talk about posting of notice and agenda, I think we also need to add on or add in that we will be posting council's questions, responses, and public input.
We have that somewhere else. So when we have that somewhere else, because I remember working on it with them.
But I think if we have our agenda, it's consistent because that's where people come to. So
okay.
And post.
And I'm indifferent if it moves here, but we already have that. And I think you raised it and we drafted that language.
Yeah, but it's about consistency, having it at both places.
Okay.
Where is it? I'm looking for
section 10. Section 11, we'll find it, Vice Mayor.
So I had a question when we do section 10.
Oh, 10, okay. Go ahead, we're on 10. I was gonna go to 11, but do 10, Councilmember Liang.
I think I always bring up my concerns regarding description of matters. So I don't know if it's 10.2 that needs to be amended. And otherwise, I'm concerned about how narrow our description of matters are, or it's something that can be taken up under 10.1. Where
so Councilmember Liang, you raised this before, and I think the direction was our city attorney was going to put together a memo.
Yeah, I
And
never got the memo.
So until we get that memo, I wouldn't want us to make any changes till we get her direction.
Okay, I have a memo. I didn't think it was gonna come up in this situation, but I'll send it out.
Instead of sending it out, what's the main point? So if I need to or like to add something to 10.2, we can.
Well, the main point is under the Brown Act and actually the norms that discuss about the agenda just needs to give notice to the public and to the council of the action that will be taken at the meeting, but it needs to be specific enough so the public's aware of what action will be taken. So if it's too broad, that doesn't meet the norms or the Brown Act. And so it needs to be specific. Like if you're going to be doing a contract amendment, it's going to be a contract amendment for a certain amount. I know you want broader agenda topics, and that's something that we can work on. But again, the purpose of the agenda title is to provide information to the public of what action will be or could be taken. So, and then I have some examples in the memo about where the court found the agenda title was not sufficient. So anyway, I don't know if we really need to put it in agenda context here. I think it's in, but the description of the matter shall be briefly described on the agenda, and the description should set forth the proposed action so the public will know the nature of the consideration. That actually tracks the Brown Act very closely.
It does, and my experience doing this, Councilmember Liang, is exactly what the city attorney is saying. So, for example, if someone proposes a future agenda item, then if there's specific things A, B, C, D that they want to make sure gets addressed, then that's the time to do it, because we have to draft the language so that it gives notice to the public what will be discussed and the scope of it. We can't have a scope and then go off and discuss something else, or have it too broad where you can discuss anything. And so the public is going to say, oh, I had no idea what you'd be discussing. Very similar to what you just mentioned about the annual retreat, where people really need to know what's going to take place. So I think this language for 10.2 is sufficient. I know the memos, if the memo comes through and if we want to bring it up again, you can. So let's table it, and then we'll go from there. Vice Mayor, are we good? Are we good? Okay. All right. Section 11. Section 12. Section 13, and then section 14. Okay. Thank you. Next steps, the city attorney and I, and I'm sure John Maginot will help us as well. We'll go through what we heard today, make the revisions, and bring this back to a future council meeting with these proposed changes for us to vote and adopt. We've also noted that majority of council wants to bring back a proposed policy addressing violations of the norms. We also have the city attorney that will get us the memo on agenda items and how they should be drafted and why. Have I left anything off the list? City attorney?
4.4, my notes are sort of all over the board on it. We're going to reference the handbook or not?
Yeah, I got it. In the first sentence, we'll refer to the handbook regarding attendance requirements.
Okay, that's what I said. Okay, yeah.
And I think not for this document, but tabled for further action is looking at the commission handbook in that regard, and in regard to the
Liaisons.
the FPPC stuff.
Liaisons, FPPC. Okay. Great. Okay. Councilmember Weinberg.
With respect to the policy on admonition and censure, is that now already put onto our tentative agenda? Or do we need to formally bring it up as a possible agenda item at tonight's meeting?
City Attorney, I've seen it done, but I think we can add it here. But if you want to bring it up tonight or it's agendized for future agenda items, let's do it there.
Okay.
Good point. Good
I
point.
would
Councilmember
say
Weinberg.
that, I think because we're trying to make sure that agenda items are added, are done consistently, and at the end of the meeting, you bring it up, and if you've got 2 or 3, so there's no confusion to the council or the public how things are getting added or not added to the agenda.
Thanks for that, Councilmember Weinberg. Okay, so with that, if no other comments, thanks again. Thank you to Trevor and the rest of the team for all their help pulling this together. We will adjourn our study session at 5:25. Thank you.